On today's show, will Nick Nurse be gone as the Toronto Raptors head coach this summer? Why does it feel like Nick Nurse has kind of run his course with the Raptors? And could Ime Udoka be the favorite to replace him in Toronto? All that and more coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Brandon Ingram to score more than 26.5 points? What about Evan Mobley to grab more than 7.5 rebounds? How about Pascal Siakam to dish out less than 6.5 assists? Or what about Steph Curry to make more than 3.5 three-pointers? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections made available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. They've got you covered for everything. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. They're safe. They offer fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Raptors, Sean Woodley, who you can find wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Raptors. Sean, there was a report that came out this past week by the Toronto Star that Nick Nurse could be on his way out as the Toronto Raptors head coach as early as this offseason. The report even named Ime Udoka as a possible replacement for Nick Nurse in Toronto. So where we need to start here is just why does it kind of feel like Nick Nurse has run his course in Toronto at this point?
Yeah, I mean, look, nothing's confirmed. No one's committed to anything. Nick Nurse has spoken a couple of times about it in public and not made any sort of declarative thing. He says his focus is on this season and all that, but certainly the timing of it is weird with, a week or two left in the season. The Raptors are deep in the play-in push in the Eastern Conference. It feels like maybe this is a thing you could leave for the offseason, but the fact that it's come up now does make me question whether or not we're going to see Nick Nurse stick with this team beyond this offseason. And I think the reasons for it, it might just be time. I think that kind of is it. Nick Nurse is a really good coach. He is an excellent in-game tactician. The Raptors, whenever he's not their coach and they get to the playoffs next, they're going to miss his sort of pulling of the cranks and levers within a playoff game. He's proven he's really good at it. He's a championship coach. He's very good. He'll get scooped up by another team, whether it's Houston or someone else, almost instantly. But sometimes change for the sake of change might just be okay. And with coaches, I think that's probably more so the case than anything else in basketball, where, after 5 years of messaging, after 5 years of Nick Nurse calling dudes out pretty regularly in the public, after 5 years of Nick Nurse's defensive stylings maybe getting figured out by the NBA, it just kind of feels like maybe it's running its course. And it's not anyone's fault necessarily. Everyone has blame on their plate for what's gone on with the Raptors this season, where they've only been 500. They've not been the team everyone thought they might be. And it goes to the front office not assembling a complete roster. It goes to the players not executing at all times or being healthy. It goes to Nick Nurse maybe not coaching to his personnel super effectively. And you get to the end of the season and it's like, well, we got to change something. Nick Nurse maybe feels like the easiest thing to change. And if he's already contemplating it himself, maybe it makes it a pretty easy sort of mutual parting of the ways for both sides this offseason if it comes to that.
I mean, and at this point, I know you mentioned it there a moment ago, saying, he's a championship caliber coach. What would you say to anybody who kind of doubts Nurse's coaching style? And I've seen a lot of, people who are maybe anti Nick Nurse saying, well, he just lucked into a championship his rookie season. Like,
yeah. That's dumb. He's a really good coach. You saw in that playoffs, in 2019, first of all, he took over a team that had all sorts of potential for combustion, right? You had Kyle Lowry having his best friend DeMar DeRozan traded away when everyone said he wasn't getting traded away, and Kyle Lowry was displeased about how the whole thing went down. You had Kawhi Leonard sitting there. He played 60 games in that season. They had to balance the Kawhi games versus the Kawhi rest games and the giant specter of his pending free agency. The fact that the Raptors had gone all in to win a title that season with no certainty that Kawhi was going to be around beyond that. That was a heavy, heavy season to manage, and Nick Nurse did a really wonderful job managing it, managing the egos involved, and the on-court play was outstanding. Yes, he was helped in the defensive department by the arrival of Marc Gasol, who made it so they could play this pliable, multifaceted defense that could basically change up coverages every time down the floor. That's a thing he's notably lacked as the type of player to direct his defense until Jakob Poeltl just arrived a month and a half ago. And it's, he's a really good coach. I don't know what to say. Like he had the playoff series against the Sixers. He goes huge and plays Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol together. He goes box and one on Steph Curry in the conference finals. He throws Kawhi Leonard on Giannis in the conference finals, and it all works out well. It just, sometimes things run their course. The message wears thin. The sort of the feelings between both sides sour for whatever reason. Again, it doesn't have to be nefarious. It's just the way things are. But if you look at Nick Nurse and think he's not a good coach, that's just wrong. Like, he's coached, it wasn't even just the title team. The season after, the Raptors were on a 60-win pace before the bubble ended that season without Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green. And they were the talk of the NBA in terms of the way their defense was this beautiful sort of chaos agent, forcing turnovers, forcing misses. It was really, really impressive. The personnel's not been there the last couple of years. Teams have figured out the way the Raptors play, and it's all led to where we are now, where it just feels very, very uneven and uncertain going forward.
So Ime Udoka was named as what may be the potential front runner to potentially replace Nick Nurse. How would you feel about him possibly taking over the mantle of head coach in Toronto for this team?
Truthfully, not awesome. I mean, I know he's a very good coach, but clearly what he did in Boston, even though we don't have the full picture necessarily of everything that went down there, clearly what he did was serious enough to warrant a 1-year suspension by a team that he had just carried to the NBA Finals. And I don't really understand the rush. We saw it with the Nets earlier in the season, the sort of rumors around him there. And now with the Raptors, I don't really get the rush to go get this guy back into the NBA. I'm sure Ime Udoka is a very good coach. It's totally possible he's learned from whatever happened. The Raptors will surely give you the line of, we're going to do our due diligence if they look into hiring a guy like Ime Udoka. This is also a team that, brought in Rodion Kurucs after doing their due diligence. If you go look at what he's done in the past, there's maybe a little bit of a flaw in trusting a franchise at their word when it comes to this type of stuff, and they're doing their due diligence. Just what they say, because they have to say it. It's possible Ime Udoka ends up the Raptors coach, and they do the deep dive investigatively and everything comes up clean and he is the head coach going forward. But for me, there's a wide pool of potential head coaches. Why, when you're changing over head coaches, when you have an ascendant star in Scotty Barnes, when you have a very interesting offseason with 3 pending UFAs and a couple of other key players who could in theory be on the trade block if things go certain ways, why would you invite all that's going to come with bringing in Ime Udoka, minus all the moral implications of it when it comes to the women in your own franchise? To me, just it's an unforced error to go and make that hire. Just stay away. Go hire one of the other thousands of people who are qualified to be an NBA coach. Maybe that's putting it strongly. Dozens, hundreds, tens, whatever it is. There's plenty who are not Ime Udoka that could go be the Toronto Raptors coach. And that's kind of where I sit with it, barring more information coming out about what actually happened while he was in Boston.
And the other maybe small piece, big piece, depending on how you want to look at it, from the story was the fact that there's a significant connection here between Nick Nurse and Houston, and that the Rockets might actually be a front runner to land Nick Nurse should he move on from the Raptors organization. I mean, at this point, Sean, how would you kind of best define Nick Nurse's coaching style and how it might translate to an incredibly young team like the Houston Rockets?
Yeah, it's two ways with this, right? He used to be a G League coach. He used to coach in the British Basketball League and all over. He, I think, has experience working with young players and developing players along. I think that's kind of where he made his bones before getting hired by the Raptors. But since being hired by the Raptors, to me, he's kind of given off more of a vibe of this is a coach for a team that's going in full mode to win a championship, who maybe doesn't even care if they like their coach or whatever. It's just this guy's smart. we're going to have him drive us to a championship, put us over the top, if you will. He feels like the type of guy that a team like, say, Dallas should go after, a team that's a little closer to competing for a title. You might get similarities in terms of over-aggressive defense and persnicketyness with the media that you get with Jason Kidd if you're hiring Nick Nurse, but that's the type of team he feels like he's more suited to. One of the big issues with the Raptors over the last couple of seasons has been the lack of development. Their pipeline has kind of gone dry. They used to, kind of bring along prospects like nobody else in the league would, right? Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, on down the line. And that's dried up. And a big part of that is the young guys on this team have not gotten a ton of opportunity to play. I'm two ways on this because I think Nick Nurse, it's a chicken or egg thing, right? You got to play these guys for them to learn on the fly, get accustomed to the NBA game. He has no time for set rotations or anything like that. And if a guy is not playing well, he's going to yank him. Whereas I also, at the other side, maybe these guys just aren't that talented, and maybe he shouldn't be playing Delano Banton heavy minutes, or Malachi Flynn was always going to be a bit of a lost cause as the 29th overall pick who came into a team that wasn't suited to his skills, and it's not Nick Nurse's fault. It's hard to say, but with the Rockets, a super young team with a lot of guys who are A, not playing defense, and B, not really kind of doing a lot of the things Nick Nurse likes to see. I'm fascinated to see how that would go. He might be the tough love guy to get those guys kind of back on track and playing real sensible basketball. He also might be a kind of a difficult guy for bringing along younger talent. It's really hard to say. He's done pretty well with Scotty Barnes. Scotty Barnes was probably going to do well on his own anyway because he's really, really talented, but it's certainly an interesting landing spot for Nurse. Definitely not one I would think off the top of my head of, oh yeah, his next job's going to be in Houston. Yeah, that's not something I would have predicted at the start of last week as a rumor that was going to come across the wire.
Will Nick Nurse be leaving Toronto this offseason? Could Ime Udoka be his replacement? Of course, you'll have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Raptors. Sean, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Anytime, Jackson. Cheers.